Driving social value is a key objective of the new Procurement Act and the opportunities to drive better outcomes. Welcome back to Efficio's TPP Microcast, and today we're joined by Ed Court, a manager from our public sector community and is our social value lead. So Ed, what's changing with social value in the new legislation?
Hi, sure. Well, thank you very much for having me on, and hi everybody. So let's talk about social value then. So I have recently been to the Social Value Conference, and as we know, the new Procurement Act is coming into force early next year, and it builds on the foundations that we already know about social value that we've had in place for years. But I think it provides a refreshing look in terms of some of the elements of social value that will force suppliers and particularly government buyers alike to be able to rethink what they see as value throughout a supply chain. There's a whole host of things changing, but I think if we focus on a couple of elements for this episode, it's the first one I think we should cover is around the shift from the most economically advantageous tender towards the most advantageous tender. So I think there's a subtlety in the wording there, but it really empowers buyers to be able to go above and beyond the price and quality element that we traditionally focus on in tenders, and really allow them to focus on the social value and put that center stage to look at the social, the environmental, and economic impacts of a tender. The second element I think that's really important is around the broader definition of social outcomes. So this, in the new Act, is around maximising public benefit, which is quite a broad definition, but it's not jargon, and it really opens the door for SMEs to be able to compete with larger organisations that would generally focus on the economic value and benefit that they could bring. And finally, the government have worked really hard to be able to align these where possible towards the UN sustainability goals, which is good to align to global goals.
Thanks, Ed. So how would one embed these changes into the procurement process?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that we always get when we're working with clients. But I think it's around it's not just about embedding embedding social value is not just about putting a checklist in place during the procurement process. It's really about embedding it from the start. So it's around seeing social value as a tool that an organization can use to be able to hit their targets. So whether it's around employment in the local area, reducing carbon, or improving employee welfare, it's around setting that from the outset of the tender and making sure that's built into the objective, so you can get your suppliers to be able to support you in getting towards your goals. Something that we see when we work with both public and private organizations is that they fundamentally forget that they can engage with the market early and have early market engagement to understand what the capabilities are of the supply chain. And you do this because you can warm up the supply chain to let them know what's coming from a social value perspective, and so they can put their best foot forward. But also it allows you to understand what you're asking for is doable and achievable based on what you're asking the supply base to do. Because what the social value demands you're asking needs to be proportionate to the contract you're letting.
Yeah, that's great, Ed. But as we all know, procurement is only the first step. So what do contract managers need to do to ensure that these actually come to life during the contract lifecycle?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think very much seen as a kind of taboo when it comes to social value, because you can build all this into the tendering process, and very much seen as from contract managers as how do we make sure that the social value commitments are delivered throughout the lifetime of the contract. And the simple answer is that suppliers or buyers, need to treat this as anything else that you would put in a contract with a supplier. They can be held accountable legally to make sure that they have delivered everything that they said they were going to do in the tendering process, and it should be seen as part of the deliverables that you need to track throughout your contract management report. So you need to set the KPIs at the start of the tendering process, and then use a framework to be able to manage that through the contract with them, whether it be weekly, monthly, or quarterly reports or meetings with them, to make sure that you play an active engagement role with your supply base to make sure that these social value elements are being delivered. But tracking and delivering social value doesn't happen passively. It requires a structure, accountability, and commitment throughout the supply chain that you need to make sure that you are delivering with your suppliers. But with these steps in place, I think organizations can be confident that they're delivering value and social value throughout their supply chain.
Thanks, Ed. That was a really insightful discussion. I think it's becoming more and more clear how social value is going to become front and center of minds for public procurement professionals. I hope you enjoyed today's microcast. Please do post any thoughts or questions on social value in the chat, but also get in touch with Ed or myself for any future topics you also want to hear about, and we will see you next week.